Joe Ziolkowski, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Awesome. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Joe, you pivoted into buying businesses from real estate. And given your successes so far, safe to say that you are happy about that pivot? There are two good acquisition stories that we're going to cover today. Let's get into it. Joe, how did you decide to pivot from real estate into small business ownership?
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of just start earlier, even since from high school, I always kind of had an entrepreneurial spirit. While a lot of my friends, got jobs just at regular retail or restaurants. I'd post ads on Craigslist, like handyman, odd jobs, and I'd charge $25 an hour. So I did that for the summers throughout high school. And getting to college, it was interesting. So kind of a little backstory, I'll keep it short, but my roommate in college, my freshman year, he turned out to be my business partner in real estate. And he was the guy that me and him wrestled against each other in high school. So we were kind of like rivals from different schools, same weight class. And so we wrestled actually in the state finals, so the highest level. And
no way.
we kind of didn't like each other in high school, and we ended up being roommates at Madison, and we both wrestled for them for a bit, and ended up kind of really getting along and became great friends. But we had the same mindset. We both kind of wanted like financial freedom early. This was like 2015, 2016. So that's when real estate kind of started to get big on social media. Bigger Pockets, we listened to a lot of their podcasts and, read their books and whatnot. So we'd literally spent, 3 years of college just in consuming as much real estate information as we could. And when we both graduated and got jobs, we started buying together, and we grew up. We brought in another partner, grew up to 130 units. So we started in 2020. By 2022, we had 130 rental units. And even at that point, though, in a good month, we would each bring home maybe $5,000 a month in cash flow. And we'd kind of, spent all the capital that we had wanted to, putting it back into real estate. And at that point, it's like, man, we either got to bring in more partners to really scale this to what we wanted to achieve with real estate. And I don't know if we had a really specific number in our head, but the cash flow wasn't as great as it can be portrayed to be on social media and all that. But
so let me stop you there. So you guys were cash flowing $5,000 a month each.
Yep. Correct.
And how much were you working to manage those 130 units?
Yeah, so it wasn't a whole lot. We had third-party property management at that point, but that was also kind of hurting our cash flow. We'd cycled through a couple of those, and it wasn't the rates they were charging, but the maintenance. So they all had in-house maintenance crews. So they were kind of incentivized to, fix every little thing possible. And it just didn't really align. So we eventually brought it in-house, hired our own guy to manage our units, and that's worked out a lot better. So we maybe spend 10 hours a week now, max. On that. But so, and that was probably the most we'd ever spent, I would say.
Because I have heard this many times that it's shocking that a portfolio of over 100 doors can yield so little cash flow. Point taken. On the other hand, when I look at the time, you guys built that in 2-ish years.
Yeah.
130 units. You're not working that hard. And it is cash flowing.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, and you were so young. I'm surprised that you were disillusioned by this. You guys really were impatient. No offense.
Well, I think a part of it was too the market changing. So even from 2020 to 2022, that's when interest rates started to climb back, up in 2022, and deals just became a lot harder to come by. We initially started by mailing, a bunch of letters, direct mail letters to homeowners and whatnot. And we had good success with that. But even a couple of years down the road, it became a lot harder. Cash flow is a lot tighter, when you're paying double in interest rates now. It just made it kind of
so you weren't going to be able to rinse and repeat. It was going to get harder.
Weren't exactly. And another thing too, side note, in 2020 and 21, our lenders would and I don't know if all lenders allow this, but we had a good relationship with them where, say, we'd buy a duplex for $100,000 and we knew it would appraise for $120,000. Well, we would offer the seller the $100,000 that they wanted, bump the price up $20,000. So technically a $120,000 offer, but then we'd get a $20,000 credit at closing to cover our down payment and closing costs. And that kind of went away when interest rates went up too. So just kind of some of the strategies we use to preserve capital when scaling were kind of gone. So it was kind
interesting. So you had this technique where you could buy a property without any money in, without any money down, which is how you did it. How you got to 130 units in two-ish years. I mean,
and that's not going to work in every market. We're in central Wisconsin where, we were buying 2-unit, 3-unit properties for $75,000 to $100,000. That's quite cheap, right? So it's not going to work, say, on the coastlines and whatnot. But we were able to make that work. We did a few flips along the way too, and that's actually how we kind of saved our capital, or I saved my capital to invest in a business. So in 22, we probably did like 3 or 4 flips, saved up about $100,000 from doing those, and used that to invest in the business. But going back to your question, it was kind of a natural pivot. Just being in the field of real estate investing, kind of in the entrepreneurial whatever on social media, YouTube, you kind of see people like, it was Cody Sanchez, I think I kind of ran across first, Alex Hormozy, some people like, people like that, right? You kind of pick up from and learn from. So I don't know who, I think, like I said on the pre-call, Eric's my real estate partner. He introduced me to your podcast, I believe, and kind of from there, listened to as much as I could and started a search on BizBuySell in 2022.
And so it was kind of like, this real estate thing is going, even though we've accumulated quite a portfolio, cash flow wise, it's not that great. It's only going to get harder. What now? And your business partner discovers Acquiring Minds. You guys are kind of both exposed to Cody Sanchez and others. And so then it's like, okay, this buying business thing might be where to go. And you learn about it and decide, indeed, this is where we're going to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I always knew too, like I was never a good employee, I felt like. So I kind of knew like corporate America wasn't for me. So I never really was involved in corporate America. I had a few jobs that lasted 6 months and I just like, I can't do this. And anyway, so it was like, I need to buy a business, right? I wanted to basically increase my earned income is what I called it, to, put that money to work in real estate, in the S&P, whatever it is. And decided buying a business, looking at the multiples. It just seemed like the right fit. So in 2022, started the search, pretty much primarily BizBuySell. And I connected with different brokers on there as well, that I would, reach out to. And I was looking to move somewhere warm at the time. So that I spent pretty much my whole life in the Midwest, mainly Wisconsin. And so I was looking everywhere, Florida, Texas, the Carolinas, and pretty industry agnostic, open to whatever. And I don't know, I kind of like that strategy. I know some people say niche down and you'll have better luck. I kind of took the approach, just had my kind of guidelines of what I was looking for, cash flow wise, price wise, what I could afford. And say I found an opportunity, I'd get the sim, review it. And if it looked pretty decent, then I'd kind of review the industry as much as I could online. Listen to videos, whatever, went into Reddit, subreddits and try to get other business owners' experience. and then kind of eliminated some from there, right? So I eliminated a couple of like franchise opportunities. Like there was a Mr. Rooter Plumbing that I put an offer in, but ended up kind of rescinding that after doing some more research on it. And yeah. So
Joe, what didn't you like about that Mr. Rooter opportunity? Just curious, because one of my most popular guests has the Mr. Rooter territory in Portland, Doug Johns. So I'm just curious.
So one of the things, I mean, I knew labor was always going to be a challenge for construction and trades and whatnot. And one of the things that I came across with Mr. Rooter Plumbing is it's hard to keep and retain good plumbers because a lot of the time they're not doing like real plumbing work in a sense. It's mainly like clean outs and kind of quick residential jobs. So it's like it's harder to keep a good, licensed plumber. And that was just kind of one of the things that I read up on. Whether it was true or not, it's kind of, I guess, scared me off to the idea. And I wasn't a licensed plumber, so in that business too, I would have had to have the seller, keep their license on board, which I saw as a risk. There was no employees that were licensed plumbers, so it just kind of didn't quite work out. But
and Joe, to your search criteria, so how much did you have capital to put toward this? What could you afford? What was the parameters there?
Yeah, so I had probably about 120,000 saved up. And I was willing to put it all to risk, essentially. With our real estate investing, we pretty much were cash broke every time a new property came up. So I wasn't too concerned about, putting all my money down. Maybe I have a higher risk tolerance than some, but I guess that was just me.
And let's also say how old were you? Are you?
Yeah, so I'm 28 now. That I was 25 then.
And single?
Engaged.
Engaged. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
But still, no kids, nothing, no mortgage.
Nope.
So you were also at a different phase of life. That also, of course, informs one's risk appetite. Yeah. Yeah. So 120,000 of your own cash to put into this venture. You're 25 years old, and ideally you find somewhere warm to live. And is your fiance at the time going to come with you? Are you guys living together?
Yeah. So no. So she's actually she was going to school in Chicago. So I was in Wisconsin, and she's still finishing up her last semester now. So she'll be done in May. But no. So she was going to stay in Chicago, and I was going to go to the place, wherever the business was. And the idea was that then she was going to meet me down there after we graduated, or she graduated.
Okay, great. So and so $100,000 to $120,000 in capital. What business size were you then targeting? What could that afford you?
Yeah, so I was really looking, probably up to the 1.5 million mark as a purchase price, just 10% down SBA, 10% seller carry, just kind of a traditional, deal structure. And I put cash flow criteria around 300,000 minimum. After debt service, I wanted to have at least 150,000 in SDE. So that was kind of my main criteria. And just started the search on BizBuySell. Probably like 6 months it took. It went through 150 different sims. And what's cool about and we talked about this a little on the pre-call. What's cool about buying a business, you can compare them in different markets across the U.S. Because essentially, if they're in the same field, same type of business, they trade relatively at the same multiples. It doesn't really matter what, I guess, city they're in, as far as I found. And that's quite different from real estate, right? So it's easier to compare when you're searching in a large geographical area.
It's a great point. It's something that, not coming from real estate, I hadn't considered. But you don't have to think about the market that much, unlike in real estate, where if you look at a property across the country, you really have no idea if it's expensive or not.
Yeah, exactly. And understanding rents and all that in that area and their laws. Right. So got pretty good anyway. I reviewed like 150 sims, got pretty good at being able to eliminate them. like I'm sure a lot of your guests, you can look over a sim in a few minutes and it's like, yeah, no, this one's not for me. And I kind of, and we did the same in real estate. We really knew what a good deal was just because we had reviewed so many real estate deals, and it kind of became the same for business here. And came across one. It was a restoration company. It was a franchise. It was a small franchise. They only had about 35 locations across the U.S. And then they had 15 corporate-owned locations, mainly all of them in Florida, the corporate-owned. And seemed like an interesting opportunity. And a little more background, I actually had one of my 6-month jobs in kind of corporate America. I guess it really wasn't corporate, but it was as a project manager in a restoration business. Oh. So I had a little bit of experience, kind of taste of the industry. And that was back in 2020. So I kind of got comfortable with the idea of this business, and really the numbers were quite attractive. So these were 2 corporate owned territories that they were selling. And I talked to them, and they wanted to focus more on their franchising side, kind of scaling that up. So they were going to start to divest some of their corporate-owned locations, get capital back to expand the franchise side. Great, that made sense. And so what they wanted, these were 2 established territories in Central Florida. They'd been around probably for about 7 to 10 years each. So they had a good Google presence, they had good reviews, and customers already. So they were selling these for a new franchise price plus the cost of the equipment. Even though, so that was, the total price was about $515,000 is what they wanted for these 2 territories. And they sent me the financials, and it was doing about 1.6, 1.7 in revenue. And it showed about, $500,000 in SDE. I kind of figured the SDE was high, because they had, 13 or 15 corporate locations kind of all in the Florida area. So they were sharing resources between locations. Yeah. And so I knew my SDE wasn't going to be that high, but still I factored, probably $350,000, $400,000. I can essentially buy these 2 territories for 1.2x or whatever it was, right?
Exactly.
Just
exactly.
Crazy valuation.
Exactly.
And at that time, the equipment was worth about half of that.
And Joe, you could justify it to yourself because there was a good, it's always like if a business is being sold for under market, it's like, well, why? It's almost more of a red flag than it is a green flag. But here there was a good reason. Corporate wanted to divest itself of these territories. Mm-hmm. To why? To redivert those resources to doing something else?
To growing their franchise side. So they were building out their franchise team and wanted to open up more territories across the U.S. Yeah.
So makes sense that there would be a deal to be had here. So that's encouraging. So there you are. You estimate that it's 350 to 400 of SDE. You're being conservative because they're telling you it's 500, but you wisely are conservative. But even at 350,000 of SDE, selling them, the sale price being 515, which by the way includes the equipment.
Includes the equipment, yeah. So
includes the equipment
half the
is
value.
a phenomenal. Oh, that was half the value. Of course, just for simplicity's sake, let's just assume all that equipment should come with because it is necessary to run the business. Yep. But anyway, it ends up being what is that? A 1.5x or less.
Yeah, 1.5 or less. Yep.
Yeah, amazing. Right. And good history, 7 to 10 years. And how were reviews? You mentioned them.
Yeah. Both locations were at 4.8 stars on Google, with close to 100 reviews. So it was pretty solid.
Very solid. Okay, carry on.
So anyway, kind of went through that process, the SBA financing, and it was kind of a pain. Just with the amount of delays. We probably had, I think it was originally supposed to close of March of 23 or February of 23, ended up closing in May, in the middle of May.
No.
So quite a few months of delay just for whatever reason. and it was a little more difficult on the SBA side because one of their territories that they were selling had its own separate tax returns, but the other territory was rolled up into several other territories that corporate had. So they had to break out each one and then verify that against the corporate tax returns the SBA lender did. So there was kind of some back and forth there, but we were able to work through it eventually and closed in May of 23. And yeah, from day one, it was pretty hectic. Just kind of being thrown into, I guess a first time owner.
And Joe, where exactly in Central Florida?
So it was in Melbourne, Florida. So it's about an hour south of Daytona, and then Ocala, Gainesville was the other location.
And you moved to
Melbourne. Yep. So I kind of
moved to Melbourne.
Yep, kind of had my headquarters there, if you want to call it, and then commuted to Ocala, Gainesville, which is a little far, about 2.5 hours apart.
Oh, you commuted, meaning you'd go there occasionally?
Yeah, like probably once every other week. I'd try to make it out there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. So you were saying how hectic it was. How was it? Tell us about ownership of this business.
Yeah. So it was kind of a whirlwind at first. I mean, I was probably averaging, 100, 150 calls a day, just from my operations managers, technicians, customers, whatever it was, and kind of like drinking through a fire hose. But what I did to initially, since these locations were so far apart, which kind of made it a little bit of a challenge, I wanted to hire an operations manager, someone who could oversee the Ocala location. And basically, I had enough cash flow, I believed, to support that, and found someone pretty good, industry experience, but they weren't a very good manager. But they had 30 years in the field in restoration, and just didn't end up working out. My employees, gotten, I guess, fights or whatever you want to call it, conflict with this new operations manager. So that was kind of a trial and error experiment that didn't work out so well. But ended up kind of pivoting, let him go, restructured the team a little bit over in that Ocala location, and was able to get things running more smoothly. But
anything more to say about that experience, Joe? I mean, as a first-time business owner, young guy making a bad hire, who's really the leader, who's going to be the leader of your essentially remote crew, or 2.5 hours away. That seems like it could have been a fetal position moment. But you're talking about it like maybe it wasn't that big a deal. Say more.
Yeah, I mean, it probably was. I don't tend to be too emotional. But yeah, I mean, for some, it probably could have been a fetal moment. I mean, I hired him for like $100,000 salary, so it was pretty good. And I thought with his experience that he'd help lead the team, but there was such a dynamic or a personality difference between him and the employees. I think age was a part of it. There was a big age gap, and I think, what I would say is if you're going to try to do that, one, vet the person as much as you can, but then also make sure it's a good fit for your team. Kind of know your team first before you make that hire. And that's kind of what I didn't do, I should say. Kind of made that hire right away without kind of really learning how my team operates and their little nuances and whatnot. Every team's different. So I guess that's one piece of advice I would say. Before you make that hire, try to learn that team yourself, and then you can, I think, plug in someone that fits with them a little bit better.
And this team out in Gainesville was with the employees at that territory were just a single crew?
Correct. Yep.
Of how many?
There were 5. One office person, 3 technicians, and then one kind of like field manager. Who also went out and, did estimates and whatnot.
Okay. And maybe just quick pause to, I think it's there in the name, restoration, but what exactly is the nature of the work in a restoration business? Because it is one that you see on BizBuySell here and there. I've heard of plenty of searchers going after such businesses. I don't think I've ever interviewed somebody who bought one. So what is restoration? What is the service you're delivering?
Yeah, so essentially it is water, fire, mold damage. If you've property damage, any of those reasonings, we come in, help remediate the water, dry it out, get everything ready to be built back. Whether it's mold, we'll put up containment, get all the mold out of there, HEPA-vac, get it cleaned up, get it tested, and then ready for, reconstruction again. Same with fire, right? So the bread and butter of the industry is really the water damage. Whether you have like a dishwasher leak or a water heater or a sump pump, whatever it is, those are the highest paying jobs, highest margin jobs. So that's really what you want to try to, I guess, go after in restoration. But a part of the problem is it's not reoccurring revenue, right? It is project based, and at the end of the day, when a homeowner has a water leak, right, and they have a pipe burst or something, they don't call a restoration company. They're going to call a plumber 9 times out of 10, if not more, just because that's the first thing you think of. And a lot of homeowners don't know what the restoration industry is. And so, the thing in the industry where leads come from is those plumbers. And so you have to, as a restoration company, especially in Florida, and this goes throughout the whole U.S., you really got to make good relationships with the plumbers in the area, the different plumbing companies. But then it kind of becomes a game of what restoration company is going to pay the highest commission for these water referrals. And Florida is notorious for high commission payouts to plumbers. In my area, you mean the average water job that we'd get from a plumber was maybe $2,500, which is on the small side. You want to kind of be around that like $5,000 job size for it to make sense, because you're paying $900 to the plumber for that referral, and you're paying it up front, right? So you're paying that day one. You get in there, do the restoration work, submit it to the insurance carrier, and then you're not getting paid for another 45 days. Wow. So there's a big kind of that negative cash flow or what have you that you kind of got to prepare for in the restoration, especially when you do larger jobs, just because they take several weeks, right? So you're going to have the carrying cost the whole time. And then at the end of the job, you then submit your total job to the carrier, and you got to just wait to get paid. And sometimes it would go out like 75, 90 days from the start of the job to getting paid, which is kind of a big deal when you're starting out, especially at a smaller scale. So something to think about.
Yeah. Well, all true, or I mean, all unpleasant, it sounds like, and kind of weaknesses of the business model. But these were viable businesses. These territories were 7 and 10 years old. And I almost feel like you got this business for such an aggressive such a low multiple that you could almost, you didn't know this at the time, so maybe you couldn't turn around and do it, but you could almost have put another, whatever, $100,000, $200,000 on the balance sheet to be working capital and still had a low multiple. You know what I mean? Would that, if you had the foresight or known how tight cash flow was going to be and how much, how long you're going to have to wait to get paid from the insurance companies, do you think that would have solved the problem?
Yeah, I definitely think it would have helped. It would have relieved some stress. But at the time, I did think I had enough money, so I got $120,000 working capital day one, and then I had another $120,000 line of credit. So I had $240 to work with between the 2 locations. So I thought it was enough. And it was. I made it through. But I did use all the working capital and basically all the line of credit until I started to have several jobs kind of come through. And it ended up working out. But yeah, I mean, that's probably where it was the most stressful. Just, that first 30 to 60 days, especially when I made that new hire. My payroll was, I'd have to look back, but felt like it was like 40,000 a month, if not more.
Yeah.
And it was stressful because you whittled through all the working capital and you're getting down on your line of credit, and these checks are supposed to be coming in. So it's kind of just like following up as much as you can with the insurance companies, with the homeowners, and just trying to get paid, right? To make that next payroll or what have you.
Yeah. Well, I also recall the story about the hotel job, which gets to how you'll do work and then the insurance company will be like, this is what we're going to pay you for the work. So tell us that story and tell us and share with us what it tells us about the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got a big, and another thing about the industry is it's on call 24/7, right? So your phone's always on as an owner. And at one point too, I was taking the leads, and you get calls in the middle of the night because that's when people get floods or fires. And it's kind of hectic. And this hotel job was, it was a fire, and then the sprinklers went off, so there's a lot of water damage as well. And got the job. We got there like 3 a.m. Took probably 4 weeks to complete. So, and at this point, I didn't have as much staff, so we would use like temporary help or temp labor, because I had crews of like 15 people in there just demoing and all that stuff. But that adds to the carrying cost, especially for a job this large. And what's unique about restoration with the insurance work, the whole industry works off one software pretty much called Xactimate. So it's like line items, and it's got certain pricing for each line item. But when you start the job, you don't submit like an estimate or anything like that to the carrier. You just get in there, you do the work, you're recording everything you do throughout the whole process. Take pictures, you have dry logs for moisture testing and whatnot. But then at the end of it, you kind of tally it all up. You get an Xactimate invoice generated based on the work you've done, and you submit that to the carrier. Well, from there, they review all your photos, they review all your dry logs, they really try to review everything you've done. And if you had missed something, or one of your technicians didn't take pictures or record something properly, even though you did the work, the carrier is not going to pay you for it. And this being such a large job, I didn't really have, this was my first big job, you could say. So I wasn't very experienced on having my guys track things as well as they should have. And we submitted our invoice, and it was $200,000 to $240,000, right around there, like $230,000 to $240,000. And a couple weeks later, the insurance company comes back and they say, look, we can only pay you $158,000 because this is all that we see. And it's just like, you kind of just have to accept it, especially when it's like you just need to get paid. And they kind of know that too, right? The carrier knows you got a lot of carrying costs over these past several weeks. So it's like you accept it or try to fight it, and then you got to wait longer to get paid. So they kind of have you under a gun, and it's like, okay, I'll just accept it and take that big of a haircut on it. But
painful. Yeah. So was the job even profitable?
It was still profitable. And that's what's great about restoration. Like the margins are quite healthy in the industry. So yeah, it was still profitable, still worked out, but it's still a stressful situation and kind of crummy to deal with when you're negotiating with insurance companies on work you did, but they're not going to pay you for it. Yeah.
Well, we all know how painful it is as consumers dealing with health insurance companies.
Yeah.
So I imagine that's a taste of what it's like to do it on the commercial side. Joe, anything else about the restoration and remediation business to say for other searchers who might be looking at listings in that category?
Yeah. One thing that we talked about in the pre-call that I think is very important if you're considering one of these businesses, to know where your leads are coming from. So to know where the majority of your calls are coming from, right? So whether it's from plumbers, whether it's from Google or online services, lead sources, or if it's from insurance programs. So you can be, your restoration company can be a part of an insurance program. So the big one in Florida is called Contractor Connection. And essentially, your business has to be established for 2 years. So your EIN has to be established for 2 years in order to be on the program. So if you're going to go look at a business in Florida, restoration, and they get most of their jobs from Contractor Connection, you need to be wary, because if you go buy it as an asset sale and you have a new EIN, you're going to get kicked off the program. So that's something to be really careful of. And there's other programs too, throughout the country. So yeah, just something to be, wary of. And two, with the plumbing side of things, it's like, how high referrals are you paying out? Does it make sense? So just really understand, where the leads are coming from.
Well, great point. And I'll just zoom out to say that I have heard a well-known lender, SBA lender, say one of the biggest oversights she sees searchers make is not understanding how money flows through the business, and particularly where the dollars come in from, exactly where those leads, what the various channels of business are. So word to the wise would be no matter the industry, remediation or restoration or remediation or otherwise, so important to understand exactly where all of your business is coming from, where all your revenue is coming from. And because ultimately these businesses are only as good as the quality of that revenue.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Pick us back up. You're in this business.
Yep.
You're getting woken up in the middle of the night. You hired an operations manager, then had to let him go. But eventually somewhat stable?
Yeah. So eventually, probably like the 5-6 month mark, kind of stabilized. The cash flow was starting to, come in from past jobs. So that issue was relieved. And, had a few larger jobs, which helped kind of boost the bank account. But ended up kind of stabilizing it, trim some of the fat that I believe, like just employees and whatnot, that corporate had been running it with, and just kind of had a good lean team that was willing to work hard, and we got more great reviews. So ended up kind of, I don't know if it was a life change or what, but my fiance and I were kind of talking at the time, and really, she didn't want to be down in Florida. Our family's from Wisconsin. So it kind of came to a point, it's like, it makes sense to sell the business. And even though I'd only owned it for 6 months, I knew what I bought it for, and I knew I could essentially flip it at that price. And ended up working with a broker, got it under contract.
Flip it at what price, Joe? At the same price, or at a with appreciation?
So I listed it for 1.2 million. So your entry multiple was incredibly low, and then when you have when you buy so low, buy for such a good price, you can essentially turn around and resell it without even adding much value. Sounds like you did add value, but you wouldn't have necessarily even had to add much value, because there was basically equity baked in, because you could just sell it for a market price of even conservative 2.5x, 3x, and come close to doubling your money. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I really grasped that concept from real estate. The last flip that my partner and I did, this is a funny story. So we're following up this guy for probably a year and a half to buy his 6 units in the central Wisconsin area. And after a year and a half, he said, "Yeah, I'm ready to sell." So we had closed on a Friday for $250,000. We knew these properties were worth way more. We closed the following Friday to another buyer. So we sold it to someone else.
Wow.
So we bought it for $250,000, sold it for $350,000 in 1 week. Yeah.
Wow.
So we I had the idea of built-in equity on the purchase side of things, just kind of from real estate, and buying this business at a 1.5 multiple is kind of the same idea.
You're a Acquiring Minds listener, so you know this.
Yeah.
But I worry for your future, because you are, when people's first experience of doing something looks like this, they think that this is the norm. the
Right.
multiple that you bought that business at is such an exception. I've rarely, if ever, heard of that sort of entry multiple. So,
Yeah.
you got lucky, as you know.
Yeah, I definitely knew that. Like I said, after reviewing so many sims, you get a good idea of, what they're selling for. And ended up, so I listed that business around 6 months in for 1.2 million. Got under contract within a few weeks. Settled on 1.1. Closed then in February of 24. So owned it from May of 23 and sold it February of 24 for 1.1.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah. And just a little bit on the deal structure. I had to make the SBA comfortable on such a short hold period. I had to have a larger seller note on the sell side to make his SBA lender comfortable. And I was fine with that, just because I knew my fiance wanted to be back in Wisconsin. So we set it up on a 5-year balloon, 7% interest, and just kind of more, I guess, passive income, you could say, just kind of similar to real estate.
So okay, and so you sold it for 1.1, and how much did you carry as a seller note then? Did you say
367?
367. Okay.
Yeah, so quite a large note.
Yeah, but you still so 750 or 733 or whatever went into your pocket, right? And then you had to pay, and then you had to pay
back
off
my SBA loan. Yeah, so I
SBA
walked
loan.
away
with about 200.
Yeah, a little over 200, 250, I would say, with pulling the money out of the operating accounts as well.
Yeah, so 250 in cash, and a $367,000 seller note that you're going to be receiving payments on for the next, what did you say, 7 years?
5 years with the balloon.
5 years.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's really something.
No complaints. I learned a lot, and the experience worked out. I know that's obviously a unique scenario, but I mean, I guess it can't be too unique with the next purchase.
Well, that's right. If listener, you thought that was good, wait until you hear part 2. All right. So you go back to Wisconsin, start looking again. Got a little bit more capital this time, and you got this nice seller note payment coming in. What does search number 2 look like?
Yeah, so search number 2 was at that time I had about a little over 300 in capital, just stuff I did 50,000 saved up from whatever, and had that 250 from selling the last business. So I had 300 to work with. So my purchase price went up a little bit. And this time around, so I felt like I bought a pretty small business. We had 11 employees total for my first one. So this time around, I wanted to buy something bigger with a little more structure to it, more of managers in place and systems in place. But my search was pretty much the same. Other than that, industry agnostic again. Whether it be trades, I looked at a transportation business, like a non-medical transportation business that I actually had put an offer in. This was a smaller one in Milwaukee, like 800,000 purchase price. So I was kind of, going against what I initially set out to do. But again, the numbers looked pretty good on it. But there was, 8 offers on it. So I ended up getting beat out. Thankfully, I did because, kept the search going. And this was on BizBuySell, essentially, pretty much. And what I'd do is I would always search for criteria, in their little options. You could put posted within the last 3 days, 7 days, or 30 days. And I'd kind of figured any stuff that was older than 30 days wasn't going to be really any good. So I'd always kind of look at just the fresh stuff. And Wisconsin being a smaller market kind of in general, not a whole lot new popped up, maybe one a day throughout the whole entire state. And,
really?
Wow. It's what it seemed like. Yeah, at least what my criteria was essentially. So I was looking for this time a minimum of 500,000 SDE And I think I went up to a purchase price of like 3 million, maybe a little above that, 3.5 I'd go up to. But, and just, yeah, kind of exhausted all my options. And I did a little cold outreach. I got a mailing list of different businesses and their email information. And I did that for a little bit, but just didn't have too much luck with it. Talked with a few owners, but it never really panned out. So, I mean, I don't know if I really recommend that because it didn't work for me, but it certainly can work out for some people. Yeah. So my business partner, Eric, my real estate partner, he kind of did that and actually had some success with it. Had a deal fully structured and about to close, but it ended up falling through. But he did find that through cold outreach. And I don't know, I just kind of view it as a sense of it's similar to large commercial real estate, where if you want deals, you really work with like the commercial brokers in the industry. In that type of sense, if you're looking for small multi-family properties, sure, you can reach out directly to the sellers and have a lot better luck. But when you're talking like bigger businesses or bigger properties, trying to reach out to sellers, I don't know, I just didn't have good success with it. So working with brokers, I think, is really the way to go, just in my opinion. But so anyway, going through this search, right, ended up exhausting kind of all the leads or what I thought in the area. But then I'm like, I'm just going to go back and kind of search like some of the older listings that over the 30-day mark, and came across this one. It just said like wood product manufacturing company and listed at 1.6 million, 1.595. And basically 3 sentences worth of information, no photos, no numbers, except the price. And I don't know, for whatever reason, like in my past like searches, I would just skip over these. I'm like, I don't even know if it's worth reaching out. There's like no really good way to get a hold of the broker besides trying to reach out through BizBuySell. There wasn't their direct contact, anything on the listing. But for whatever reason, I decided to reach out and got back to me and signed an NDA, looked at the SIM. I'm like, holy wow, this is a solid business. On the SIM, this was 2024. They had financials right away going back to 2018 that they'd showed. So right on the SIM. So I thought that was great. Yeah. And because I don't think I've ever seen that out of the other 100 and whatever 50 SIMs that I'd reviewed. So it's nice to see kind of how they went through COVID and those times, especially for a wood manufacturing company. And so viewed the SIM, everything looked great. Kind of for reference wise, they were doing about 11 to 12 million in revenue, basically every year. And just really staying consistent. And even in 2020, it dipped down to 10.5 million, and they still turned a profit that year, which is just like, wow. I mean, I found that pretty impressive. And 2021 bounced back, and 22 is business as normal. And ended up getting so the SDE numbers averaged right around 800,000 for this business every year, besides the 2020 and 2021. I think it was like a couple 100,000 those years. But all the other years were like 700,000, 800,000. 2024 was actually 930,000. So a really good 2024. And listed for a little under 1.6. I offered 1.35, which, I mean, for whatever reason, I didn't know if this was a competitive situation or not. I guess I had a good conversation with the broker, and he said there weren't any other offers on the table at the moment. I'm like, yeah, there's got to be, this is too good to be true. And
Joe, let me stop you there. Yeah. Hold your thought, please.
Yep.
So, first of all, what does it manufacture? What are these wood products that it produces?
Yeah, so we make one product. It's wood veneer faces, essentially. So if you think of like a veneer door or like paneling that goes into building cabinets, we literally just make the outer veneer face that then we sell to other manufacturing companies that make the final product door or the final product paneling, essentially.
And do you sell it in like rolls or something?
Like 4x8 sheets, or literally the
4 by
size
sheets.
of the size of the door. So we get pretty customizable in terms of working with our customers. If they need certain dimensions, for their doors, we can make it to exact specification. And there's a lot to the industry, but our kind of value proposition is being more customizable than the competitors in the industry, and just being at a kind of a premium product with a higher price point, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So
and so this is a manufacturing business that does 11 to 12 million in revenue, and call it averaging around 800,000 of SDE.
Yep.
Really consistent revenue. There was a COVID dip, but a minor one, and it bounced right back.
Yep.
It had been sitting, and the sale price is you said just under 1.6?
Just under 1.6, yep.
1.6, so that's, call it 2x or just shy of 2x for a business doing $800,000 in SDE. And it's been sitting on BizBuySell.
Yep.
And the best explanation of that is that it just had it was just a bad listing, no information, a few sentences.
That's the only thing I can think of. And I guess too, it was in a smaller market, a smaller town. It's in Two Rivers, population of like 11,000, but that's about 30 minutes from Green Bay. And but yeah, so I don't know if that had to do something to do with it, but their customers are across the U.S., so that doesn't really affect where it is too much.
I would think at that size, an $11 million manufacturing business would have management in place. So while you probably would want to spend a lot of time in Two Rivers, you wouldn't necessarily have to move there.
Correct.
What did you think? Correct or not?
Yeah. I mean, I would agree. But
have you moved there?
I did. Yeah, I moved to Green Bay. So about a half hour away, my commute is. Just wanted to be in a little bit bigger of a city, but then it worked out because my fiance, her job is half hour the other direction. So we're kind of right in the middle of that, and so it works out good for that.
Great.
Yep.
So, okay, so this is remarkable. And so you reach out to the broker and he's like, no other interest. And so already finding a business that the sale price, what the seller wants, is already
fair.
2x.
Yeah.
More than fair. Under market, let's say. You were feeling especially lucky and bold, and you offered even under that. You offered 1.35.
Yeah, offered 1.35. And I don't know if I got that from kind of the broker, having a conversation with him. I think it just seemed the sellers were kind of just ready to sell. They were, in their 70s, so just ready to retire at this point. But
and you knew it had been sitting, so you knew that it wasn't competitive. So that was the only offer they were going to be looking at that week. So that would give one some confidence.
Yeah, exactly. So offered 1.35. They accepted, literally within, I think, a day or two. And we kind of had a little negotiation. Wow. Yeah. Had a little negotiation back and forth over the next few weeks. And the price actually went to 1.4 million purchase price. But the original listing said it only included $1 million in inventory and all the equipment that went involved. So it was going to be, even though there was about 2.6 million of inventory that they had, they were just going to try to liquidate the other 1.6 and include, $1 million with the sale price. Eventually kind of just like they came back to me and they're like, look, we don't really want to deal with this inventory. So let's bump the purchase price up 50,000, then we'll include all 2.6. So I got an additional 1.6 million in inventory for 50,000. So I'm like, yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Wow. Which, of course, so just to press on that a little bit, 1.6 million in inventory. We don't really know how saleable that inventory is. So let's be super conservative and say it's really worth half of that. That's still $800,000 of inventory that you got for 50. So I mean, so much equity here.
Yeah, and the equipment too. And I was talking with Rick, the owner. The splicers, they're called. I mean, these are $250,000 machines, and we have 4 of them. And all the equipment, it's got to be, I don't know what I could sell it for used, but the equipment now I could probably sell for over $1 million just in that. So I got really comfortable with the fact, I'm like, man, even if this business goes completely under, I lose every customer. I mean, even in a liquidation sale, I should be completely fine. You know what I mean? Like it felt like the risk I was taking was just completely mitigated with the inventory and with the equipment and the value of that. So, we ended up closing at 1.4, and this was such a smooth closing compared to my first one. I think a part of the reason, so I use, and I don't know, this is probably not going to work out in every situation, but the sellers had a really good relationship with their banker, just a local, not a local, but kind of medium-sized regional bank in Wisconsin. And I ended up using them for the SBA loan. So their lender knew the books already inside and out because they had been working with them for a long time. And pretty much knew everything about the business. So it just made the process so much easier on the closing side of things. And literally closed on the day we said we were gonna. And
very interesting tip. So if the seller owner has a good relationship with a particular lender, in this case, kind of a regional lender, and if that bank will do SBA 7A loans, acquisition loans, you think that as long as you kind of go to that person within that bank and who's already familiar with that business, there's a lot of kind of opportunity there to remove friction. It
seemed to be the case, and I felt I got a pretty good rates. So for reference, my first business that I closed, I think my SBA loan was a little over 11%. So and it was variable. So like from the start, this one was 7.75% fixed for 3 years. So I thought, it's quite a bit better than my last one. And I'm like, if it's going to be a lot smoother transaction, it was well worth it. So, it was. Like I said, the first one had several delays. This one closed on the date we were said it was gonna, and I mean, literally not a single hiccup in the whole SBA process this time around. So I was quite happy with it. And it's funny because now I'm using their same accountant as well, which works out great because they know all their books inside and out. And all I had to do was kind of sign up with them, and it's such an easy transition. And I think this really works too when you have good sellers who are organized, who are trust. I mean, I couldn't have asked for better, more trustworthy sellers, just real down-to-earth people. And I guess that's a tip too. So I kind of, during the due diligence phase, I was still down in Florida, but I flew up to Wisconsin, got to meet the sellers, and it just went really well. I got to tour the whole facility, really saw how clean and organized it was, and they just seemed like great people. So I got comfortable with that fact, and it ended up being true, at least so far.
Okay. Well, at least so far, Joe. So I was going to say, okay, so tell us about all the skeletons in the closet this underpriced business has. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. And in fact, it may not. This is as good as advertised, it seems so far.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing that I was able to see before I closed on the business, they had a small customer concentration. Okay. And right, every deal, a lot of your guests, every deal is going to have some kind of hair on it. There's just really no way around it. And I think this was the biggest kind of hurdle to overcome. at least in my mind. I mean, their biggest customer or our biggest customer is doing at like 40% of our revenue, and which is quite a bit. And then we're probably our top 3 or top 4 are doing 80% of our revenue.
Okay.
So quite a small customer concentration. So I kind of had to get over that kind of, I guess, fact going into the purchase. But after closing and now learning more about the whole industry, well, part of that fact is there's so much consolidation in this type of industry, where we did have more customers at one point, but now this one bought that one out and so on. So there's a little more concentration that way, but there just really isn't any other options per se. So whether that's on the supply side or customer side, there's only so many commercial door manufacturers at scale. There's only so many veneer suppliers like us. So it seems like right now the industry, it's kind of in a good balance of supply and demand. And actually the tough part right now is getting the actual veneer, the raw material for us to build fast enough. So it's a good problem to have. But so we work with various suppliers and whatnot. But so
and your suppliers deliver you what? Wood? Like
raw
lumber?
flitches. Yeah. So it's basically, it's called a flitch. So it's lumber, or a tree cut in very thin slices, and they send it to us, and we cut it down, sort it, and essentially splice them together with glue and create a finished face. But so kind of long story there. That was kind of the biggest hurdle, I guess, to overcome is the hair that on the business that I've found so far. Other than that, it's been smooth operations.
And Joe, just double clicking on this weakness of the business, this customer concentration. It sounds like you don't see an obvious way to ameliorate that there aren't a lot of, unless you start offering completely new products in different categories, there aren't a lot of other customers to go get, because it's a pretty concentrated industry. It's one of those where the industry itself has concentration, so it's hard to escape that concentration.
Exactly. And just for anyone that would want to go start a veneer face business, it's pretty much at this point almost an impossible business to start. At least I think, just with the knowledge that you need of the actual wood and the veneer itself. I really didn't understand kind of going into it. And now that I'm learning more about it, it would be so difficult for someone to actually start a veneer face business. And so I felt like there's kind of a moat there as well.
Yeah.
It's also capital intensive. Like, you need to do it at scale. You need expensive equipment. So you're really not going to get mom and pop shops really, popping up. So quite a bit different than the last business I was in, restoration, where there are a ton of mom and pop shops and private equity and what have you, and franchises. So,
okay, so you learned that about the business, that it's a weakness of the business, but it sounds like there really were not other skeletons. The owners, you were saying good things about them pre-transaction. Post-transaction, you feel just as good about them. They were organized. They were... Well, I mean, why... Do you have any more visibility into why they didn't list the business for more?
I've kind of had this conversation with the owner. I didn't directly go and ask him. But I mean, he's kind of reminded me a few times. He's like, look, I know you got the deal of a lifetime, essentially. He's like, and so he recognizes that, right? And I think what was
all the more mysterious then, if he really knew. So continue.
Yeah. So I think, in kind of talking with him further on that, I think the biggest thing to him was really seeing his employees taken care of and making sure, I didn't just come in there. I wasn't some, corporate company that was going to kind of change the structure, fire people and what have you. Because they had seen that in a smaller town. There's here in Two Rivers, there's other manufacturing companies that have recently sold. And actually, our neighbor, literally right next door. They had recently sold a couple of years ago to a large corporation, and it kind of got dismantled. So he saw that firsthand, what happened to those employees, and just didn't want that to happen to his. And I think another point is, I mean, he told me, he's like, so he started this business in 2001, 2002, right around there. And he's like, look, I've done really well for myself. It's not about the money at this point. And I kind of verified that. So their operating system, the wife built it from scratch. And so she was kind of technical. So that's, I think, another reason they're so organized, just because they
What do you mean their operating system, Joe?
Yeah, it's their ERP, essentially, that tracks all the inventory and accounts receivables.
She built it? What do you mean? She coded it?
She coded it, yeah.
She's a developer.
Yeah, she was a developer. Yeah. So they got this perfectly tailored system that they've been using for years. And it's completely, capable. And I don't think there really is a dedicated software for this industry per se, because it's just too small. So what the wife had built really worked well. But anyway, they'd used this since the beginning, literally since 2002. So you can look up the lifetime sales of the business and kind of run all that. And so they've been doing about 10 million a year since inception. So the total lifetime sales was around like 240 million. So 20 years in business. So that's just going back to the point of, he's done well. And I think they've really cash flowed, probably 700,000-800,000 a year for 20 years almost. He even said the year they started the business, they were profitable year one. So it's like they never actually ran a negative cash flow at the end of the year, even through 2008 and 2009, which really kind of gave me comfort too in buying the business. If they were able to make it through that, especially in an industry that kind of relies on housing and building and development, I'm like, wow, I just don't see us going back there anytime soon. So that kind of gave me confidence too, going through with the purchase.
The dependence on real estate, on building generally, does that give this business some cyclicality?
Not quite. Not that I've seen. I mean, there might be like a slight dip of maybe 10-15% in like November, kind of December months, just kind of during the holiday months. But other than that, no, it's been month over month pretty stable. And so not too much cyclicality.
Oof. Joe, people are going to be so frustrated hearing your interview. No, I'm kidding, man. But listen, congratulations. I mean, let's just take a moment to say congratulations on a hungry entrepreneur getting just a wonderful deal, and not only a great deal, but just a high quality business and owners that seem to be just totally selfless about what they were trying to do here in this transition. They were trying to do right by their employees and right by the legacy of the business. Even if that meant they didn't, line their pockets as much as they could have. So really, I don't think noble is too strong a word to say. So that's just wonderful. Anything more to say about the story? I want to leave. We have one more little segment on. I just want to hear what it's like to run a manufacturing business as a guy who doesn't come from manufacturing, and hear you compare and contrast it with home services, high pressure, high stress, project based home services, so the restoration business. Before we get into that, anything else you want to call out or say?
I mean, kind of going when you're it was tough, especially with like such a small. It's generally a small industry, like the wood face veneer, and when you're going through due diligence, it was pretty difficult to try and learn more about the whole industry, kind of the ins and outs, and because there really just isn't anything online. There isn't other business owners talking about their wood veneer manufacturing business like there are home services, which kind of go hand in hand.
Like you said before, you can go to YouTube University to hear restoration owners talk about best practices in their businesses. Go to subreddits devoted to this. Not so in the wood veneer manufacturing business owner place, where there's probably a handful of such people in the world. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think what I kind of wanted to do to get as much knowledge as I could, especially after closing, was to keep the owner on for a little longer, and which he was completely comfortable with. And I think we have like a 6 month or a year kind of. We have 6 months like in person, then a year, or however long I need for consultation. And, I'm just trying to sit with him every day and learn as much as I can about the industry. Just because as I'm going through due diligence, I'm looking at ways, just like kind of any other business, like how can I increase revenue, right?
Yeah.
And, you're trying to think of like, okay, well, in traditional business, you think about bringing things in-house, right? To control the process more and eliminate the middleman, so to say, and get more margin on a sale. So like before I close, I was trying to think of, okay, maybe I can bring in plywood manufacturing, like bring in a press, and then I can put my veneer on that and then sell the plywood with the finished veneer, like skip kind of the middleman. And just having these conversations with Rick, the past owner, after closing, he that's one of the reasons he stayed in business for so long, especially in this industry. It's so tight knit that if I would bring in a press and start making plywood and selling that to end consumers or end businesses, I would literally lose two of my biggest customers because they're doing that as well. And he said he's seen that in the past where other veneer mills tried to bring in their own in-house, and it just doesn't work, and they eventually go out of business. So what I'm trying to say is essentially it's like if you can learn as much as you can from the owner, like take advantage of that, especially with an industry like this where it's just hard to find information, and it really is just it's going to take years of experience to fully understand it. Try to absorb as much as you can from the owner if they're willing and able. I think is a really important thing.
Yeah. And so your point there is that he's basically, by sharing this industry experience, what he's seen over the years, other mills trying to bring in presses and do that, he's saved you from making that similar misstep.
Exactly.
And and by the way, does he see any way for you to grow the business? I mean, one of the great questions to a seller is always, if money were no object, what would you spend money on tomorrow to grow this business? What do you think he would say?
Yeah, so there's definitely a few more customers, and even our biggest customer right now, they want more product from us, but essentially what we're trying to do, our top 4 customers, we're trying to balance out and allocate as much of our production capacity as possible to each one to kind of keep each one happy, right? I mean, we could just keep giving more to our largest customer, but then the lead times for our other customers extends, and they might get not happy and leave. But we've been averaging. We've been closed for about a month now. About a $900,000 backlog, week over week, and that's about 3 to 4 weeks out. So if money wasn't an option, I think it would be to expand the production capacity, kind of make hay while the sun's shining, and but then to his point as well, he said you got to be careful because when slowdowns do come, now you have more overhead, you've got more maybe loans on the equipment, more staff. So a part of his things of just staying the same size for 20 years was to never have to worry about that problem, because he also has seen that. So it's just such a unique industry that kind of goes against, it seems like, some normal business practices. In a sense, but it's worked out, and they've kind of come up with this formula that I just want to keep operating.
Well, it's interesting because it is an approach you could take to business to remove bumpiness of revenue and the pain of downturns. The temptation of every business owner is, like you said, when make hay while the sun's shining. When there's a lot of demand, you want to use that as an opportunity to grow. You grow into that demand.
Mhm.
But if you perceive that that demand is going to be transient or is going to be a cycle and then it's going to come back down, you can choose not to grow into that demand.
Yeah.
And just always kind of stay at a certain level, even though in the good years you could be selling more. You then don't have to suffer the pain of having too much overhead, too many people in the
Right.
down years. It's and I feel like in some ways every business could make that calculation, or it kind of implicitly does make that calculation. Whenever you're growing, you're
Mhm.
asking yourself, is this demand that I'm growing into always going to be here, or is it temporary, or what? So anyway,
Yeah,
interesting
exactly.
philosophical discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe, let's start rounding out here by hearing about the difference in day-to-day or otherwise of manufacturing your now life versus home services. First, let me ask, just you've said already, like you're learning at his knee and you've learned a lot, and you're basically in a hit the books mode, studying every day, listening.
Yep.
But for a manufacturing business that isn't, I would call this not super sophisticated manufacturing. This isn't, defense and aerospace or something.
Right.
How difficult is it to learn? I mean, do you feel like after a year you'll kind of know it, or what?
I mean, yeah, I think after a year I would learn kind of the general ins and outs of it, but just with the variability of like wood itself, that's kind of where the difficulty and experience comes in just over time. Because a big part of our bread and butter is buying a certain class of veneer from the veneer mill. So it's like, say, B class. It's kind of graded throughout the industry, like AA, A, B, and so forth. A big part of our business is kind of buying, A, B type quality wood at a certain price, sorting through it, and then finding AA quality in it. And so he's like, explaining this to me, and I'm like, oh, so it's like arbitrage. He's like, what's that? And I'm like, yeah, well, you're buying this veneer at 12 cents a foot, and since you're sorting it and finding the good stuff, now it's worth 36 cents a square foot by just, sorting it and knowing the quality and knowing what to look for in the grains and in the pattern and whatnot. And there's how many different species of wood. So it's just like so many little nuances like that I think is just going to take time to really see the value in the veneer. So I just thought that was really neat how that's kind of they've been operating. And you just, I guess, didn't really know the term, but it's exactly kind of what he's doing.
Yeah.
But another thing too, that just like with the day-to-day operations, like another kind of hiccup that I had to get over, and this kind of went hand in hand with the last point, was, well, why aren't our customers just, bringing this all in-house and doing it? And, well, I came to realize, well, if they do the same thing, just buy, AA priced veneer, the most expensive stuff, which they typically want from us, well, they're going to be paying a lot higher price for it, and it's going to actually cost them more money in the long run when we can buy an AB pallet. We have customers that want B grade and AA. So our customers want different ranges of things. So if our end consumer tried to like just bring it in-house, well, now they have to sort all the wood, and they're not buying a standard product. So when we finish our product, they know exactly what they're going to be paying per face and what it's going to be and the quality of it. So there's a value in, in that sense, by us creating a fixed price product for them. They can run their numbers a lot easier, and it actually is more costly or cost effective for them to buy from us as well.
Well, that analysis that you just did is a really good analysis to do going into a transaction. That's kind of a supplier. That's probably like a Porter's 5 forces. I think you might have just hit on one of the 5 forces in Porter's 5 forces of the supplier risk. or excuse me, I guess in this case it was your customer risk. But the point is, in every value chain, the end product is touched along the way by however many players, each taking a little bit of a profit. And there's always the question of any of those players: do they move up or down that value chain, consolidating and starting to offer the service either above or below them on the value chain, which is the phrase for that is vertical integration. And it's just a good exercise of, when you're evaluating a business, is there an opportunity for your target business to maybe do that? And or are either your suppliers upstream from you or your customers downstream from you on the value chain likely or able to want to consolidate into your space, or to vertically integrate into your space in the chain. So it's just a great analysis to understand where the value is and why or why not people would step on each other's toes or go into each other's link in the chain. Very interesting.
I kind of went away from your question, like how the day-to-day is going. I mean, it's business is running smooth compared to my first one. And this was one of the reasons I wanted to buy a bigger business. We have a couple management structures in place. And another great aspect I didn't mention. So the daughter of the two sellers, who has been working in the business for the past 15 years, she is staying on full time. She didn't want to be an owner, but she wanted to stay involved in the business. And her kind of role was, I guess, like the VP. So she's staying in the same role and really just knows the ins and outs of the whole business. So she's been just an absolute blessing. And I don't know how. I mean, that must be a pretty unique situation where they, the child wants to stay on but not be an owner. So yeah, I mean, I think I was fortunate in that sense, and she's just been amazing to work with. We get along really well, and as I said, they've built such a great operating system and process that it almost seems like I'm coming in here and I'm like, what do I change? There's at this point, I don't feel like I've learned enough to see anything that I've want to have changed yet. But that's kind of, I'm sure it's going to come with time. I'll kind of put my own spin on certain things and maybe modernize a few different processes. But it's been smooth running. Customer orders are still coming in nice and strong, and really no hiccups on the production side either. So
amazing, Joe. I will say you are the second interview in as many weeks where the buyer bought a business, and in the business, one of the managers and ultimately kind of general manager was a child of the owners that just didn't want to buy the business, but wanted to stay in the business. Yeah. And in both cases, yours and the other, it's working out well. Despite the obvious risk that would seem like there'd be resentment or whatever. Why aren't they the ones to buy the business? And it's not crazy that they just simply don't want to be the business owner, but they love the business and want to stay in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Joe, this you're making it clear that this beautiful $10-11 million business is just happily humming along. No fires to put out, no middle of the night calls, unlike the restoration business. Do you think that that's inherent to manufacturing, that makes manufacturing different than project-based home services? Or is it more the difference in size, which you already kind of gave credit to? It's just a bigger business and therefore more processes and so on. Because I feel like it could be both, but maybe not. Maybe a restoration business, a $10 million, $15 million restoration business, if you were sitting at the top of that hierarchy, would also be a finely tuned machine humming along. What do you think?
I don't think it's manufacturing specifically, but more to the size. And I think really more to the actual owners and how they operated the business. As I've said, the system that they put in place, it just works so well of keeping everything organized and just the experienced staff. I mean, we have a team of 35 employees, so and a lot of them have been around since it started, right? So 20 plus years, and they all know more than I'll ever know about wood manufacturing or veneer manufacturing, but it's just great to see, and having that team in place. And I think it'd be no different with restoration. If it's a big business and there's a full team in place, as long as the owner's been operating it how it should be, I think it'd be, generally pretty smooth sailing as well.
Great, Joe. Anything else to say about the businesses, the story, or have we covered it all?
I think that's pretty much it. I mean,
you still have your 130 units?
So we've divested down to 78, like a core 78 that are our best properties, which has also helped too, and kind of alleviate some headaches. As kind of the saying goes, 80% of your problems come from 20% of the whatever
it is.
Yeah, whatever it is. So we kind of got rid of some of our bad properties, and down to 78. So that's running smooth, and so is the manufacturing business.
and Joe, just want to make sure I got the numbers right. So you bought it for you offered 135, and then that went up another to 1.4. You said.
Yep, went to 1.4.
And then what was the structure? 10, 10, 80?
Correct. 10, 10, 80. Yep.
Okay. 10% your cash, 10% seller note, 80% SBA loan. And how much are you paying yourself?
So I'm just paying myself $60,000 a year.
Oh.
I mean, pretty much.
How'd you arrive at that number? Because I recall from your real estate days, that's exactly what your real estate was paying you, and you weren't happy with that number.
Well, because right now, that's kind of what my, the real estate pays me as well. So that adding to this 60,000 plus my fiance, she's graduating. She's going to be an optometrist. So starting up in June. So that'll be a, pretty decent income as well. So I feel like I don't need more. My goal is just going to be to pay down the SBA loan. My goal is to pay it off in 3 years. So that's kind of putting everything back into the business and keeping a decent amount of reserves. And also part of the structure, I got a $500,000 line of credit to operate. But a great thing with this business is they've structured it with our main suppliers who we buy the raw material from. We have a 45-day net pay, but all of our customers pay on net 30. So that works out just beautiful. And I think that's a part of the way the wife, Sharon, she just kind of structured it over the years and kind of built up those relationships. And basically everyone pays on time. They've showed me the books, and it's just incredible compared to the restoration industry. And I think it's such a tight-knit industry like that. If you don't pay on time, you kind of get a bad rap, and people, there's only so few players, so you kind of want to keep a good reputation. And that works out the pay structure and the cash flow wise.
Well, like restoration, what we often hear though is in construction, where construction is just the opposite. The terms that you get paid are net 60, and yet your suppliers are all net 30. So you're paying everybody before you get paid. And in your case, that's flipped. You're getting paid before you need to pay everybody else. Just incredible cash flow dynamics.
Yeah, and that was and kind of just real quick going back to the search. That's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to stay away from like big commercial. I guess like a commercial construction business. Like one I looked at was just an electrical contracting business, and when they work on big commercial properties, I mean that negative cash flow cycle is it's kind of brutal to deal with, especially as when you have an SBA loan on top of what the owner doesn't have, so it's a lot harder to manage.
Yeah,
but
Joe, my takeaway from your story is that everybody should go to BizBuySell and look for listings that have been sitting for over 60 days.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely
see what's hiding in there.
Yeah, there's definitely some potential there. And that's, no different than real estate, right? You get properties that have been listed for 180, 300 days. It's like there's opportunity. And was luck involved? Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to say here that everyone's going to go find businesses at less than 2x, But I don't know, just I guess takes persistence and just keep looking.
Joe, if people want to reach out to you, is LinkedIn work, or do you prefer some other way?
Yeah, LinkedIn works. I guess, I mean, email, I don't know if should I say my email?
Go for it.
It's just Joe, Joe, at woodlandface.com. You can email me there. LinkedIn works as well, but yeah.
Great. And thank you for the name of the company, Woodland Face.
Woodland Face Veneer. Yep.
Woodland Face Veneer.
Yeah.
Great. Joe Ziolkowski, thank you for coming, sharing, being so transparent. And of course, congratulations again on not one, but two under market acquisitions. And you're not yet 30. So a lifetime of good deals. You cashed it in early, man. It's only hard. It's only going to get harder from here. That's what karma would say.
Yeah, right.
All right, Joe, thanks a lot.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Well, thank you.
Hope you enjoyed that interview. Don't forget to subscribe to the Acquiring Minds newsletter. We send an email for every episode with an introduction to the interview, a link to the video version on YouTube, and soon, key takeaways, numbers, and more essentials from the interview for those of you who don't have time to listen or watch it. Subscribe at acquiringminds.co. You'll also find all our webinars there on the website, both those we have coming up and recordings of past webinars. At this point, there are over 30 webinar recordings, a wealth of information on all the technical nitty-gritty of buying a business. acquiringminds.co.